Hey, Fedheads, welcome back to another episode of Cigar Chat, broadcast around the world on the Armed Forces Radio Network, available on your favorite podcast catcher, on YouTube, or live on Facebook. I'm your host, Tripp, here with my co-host, Jason, and of course with our special guest of the evening, Chris Topper. We're going to be talking about Topper Cigars tonight, so tune in. All right, guys, we're back. That intro seemed really short. I'm not sure if I accidentally queued it up wrong or not. But anyway, we're here talking to Chris Topper. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. Good to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Happy to have you. And Jason, how you doing?
Doing good. Smoking some tasty broadleaf. It's always good.
Yeah, we'll get to talking about that in just a minute. So first I want to start with Topper Cigars is, as far as most cigar companies are concerned, it's very old. Like most cigar companies that we're used to in the U.S. were started in at the earliest, the 40s, and Topper was started in 1896, right?
It's my fourth generation. So my great grandfather started the company in 1896 in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's a lot of there's a lot of history in this brand, which I really like. Can you briefly go over the history? I know a little bit of it, but I'd rather you tell the stories.
So it's interesting. We're mostly known a lot for machine-made cigars, but our true history and where we started and what we did for both the prior three generations, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, all made handmade cigars with Cuban long filler, and we used Connecticut Broadleaf for wrappers. So that started in 1896 and went all the way through into the 60s, basically. Different variations. Sometimes we'd have one generation was usually running the factory, another generation was running distribution. Mm-hmm. And my father at one point had to do kind of both. My grandfather passed away early, so but the one thing that I wish that I would have been able to do is to actually be able to work. I mean, I'm still around the factory all the time, but to actually show up there every day to work would have been something that I really wish that I would have had the opportunity to do. But in the early 60s, or right around the time of when the embargo hit, we mm-hmm. went from my dad was making it was Cuban long filler and broadleaf wrappers, and basically we had my dad was down to like 10 or 15 rollers, and their average age was 70. So
oh man.
Not really a good future in without they had no labor pool. They had no labor force there. So the interesting part though about it was a town called McSherrystown, Pennsylvania. And back when in the early 1900s, late 1800s, there was like 20 cigar factories in a town of about 1,800 people. So it was a little mecca there for. But in any event, in the 60s, there was just a couple left. And when we transitioned between the embargo and not having enough rollers to keep up with demand, we switched over to a machine-made cigar. And my dad worked with FX Smith and Sons, and they were literally 2 blocks away. It was right around the corner. So they had already had the machines all set up, and they took over our production at that point in the 60s. So, and I still work with him today. So a long time. It was a huge transition. I mean, just think about that going from, you think of today with social marketing or everything that we do on social media.
Yeah.
And to go from a handmade long filler, Cuban long filler, cigar to a machine-made short filler cigar without any Cuban filler, that's a heck of a transition to put a spin on, and it was certainly a challenge at the time. So, but,
that's a huge change to me.
Unbelievable. I mean, you think about it. So, and that's why from the 60s on, we were mostly. We dabbled in always did a few handmade cigars from the. I think it went till about the 80s, and we started working with a few different people. My dad and my brothers worked with Nestor Plasencia and a couple different people in the Terranos. So we made some cigars with them, but it was always just kind of small runs, and it wasn't a big part of our business. It was just a little bit of an add-on, but it was mostly machine made. But a lot of people don't really know that we actually made a Cuban long filled cigar back in the day. So
what was does that count as a clear Havana? I think that's what a clear Havana is.
I still have a lot of boxes that say clear Havana, sure.
Yeah, so which is a clear Havana means a cigar made in the U.S. using a U.S. wrapper, but with Cuban long fill. Jason, I'll let you ask a question before I start getting to some of my other questions and some of our shout outs to people who are watching.
Okay. Cool. So do you know, was it a difficult process to source your filler tobacco again when you lost access to the Cuban filler? Did you have to transition to the Dominican Republic at that time?
So, I mean, I don't have the exact answer to that question other than the Smiths were making, I mean, they had a factory that they've actually had, their history goes to 1863, and they were, Craig Smith, who I work with, is fifth generation. So, I mean, they already had a factory that was, making production and making cigars. So, and Lancaster Leaf which is a big supplier of the short filler, is close by too. So, my guess is, without any BS, I mean, they already, that's what they were doing. They had their business, their business model was making cigars out of short filler. So they had it. My guess, based on even what I do today, is that my father would have gone over and kind of gone through and seen what they had. They may have had some extra Cuban left over. I'm sure they took a little while to transition through. So they probably used as much as they could. And even if they had, I mean, it sounds like a sin now, but they might have chopped up some of the long filler just to mix in there, just to kind of keep the flavor consistent as they transitioned over to the machine-made cigars. So,
yeah,
I mean, I don't know that to be
really
a fact, but I mean, what else would you do? You don't really have an option. You can't get any more. You're not going to use it as long filler at that point. I mean, there wasn't the market for cigars like for the premium cigars like there is today. So, my guess is that they probably did some of that, or even if it was seconds or the stuff that they weren't using for a long filler, we probably had a lot of stuff that they had. There's cuttings and different things too, so they're probably using that anyway. So that would be my guess.
That's a really interesting kind of historical era in cigars that I think a lot of people don't even think about. Most of the time nowadays, when we're talking about cigars, we go back to the 80s, but we don't really think about that, 60s and 70s, the transition away from Cuban tobacco into other things.
Yeah, because back then Cuban was just part of cigars. Like, if you were smoking a cigar, it probably had some Cuban tobacco in it at that point.
Exactly. So, I mean, it wouldn't be really, I don't think it would be a good analogy to say all of a sudden if we didn't have Dominican or we didn't have Nicaraguan, but I mean, that was one of the main sources. So I don't know what you would do for an analogy today, but if all of a sudden you lost a huge supply of something, I mean, it certainly would be a good analogy. That might be a good FDA challenge as well. So
I think a good analogy would be like if suddenly there was no more broadleaf. Like, it's become an integral part of what people smoke. And if there was suddenly no more, everybody would be trying to figure out how to replace that kind of like signature flavor.
I mean,
that's the best analogy I could come up with.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll go with that. I'll agree. Being a broadleaf guy, I'll say I agree to that one.
And speaking of broadleaf, you are a broadleaf guy, and Topper has just kind of always been a broadleaf company, right? Like, you guys haven't made very many cigars that aren't broadleaf ever.
I mean, it's kind of like our little niche. I mean, it was a little niche up until until the recent 10 or 15, 20 years when all of a sudden it exploded and started being used on a lot of other cigars. So, which actually, from what's happened, I mean, it's made it extremely difficult to keep our costs down because, I mean, all of our cigars.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next.
I mean, all of our cigars retail for less than, in general, like $3.50 or $4. So it becomes very difficult based on the cost. I mean, I know I started with my dad in '94, and in '95, the price in the field buying from a grower was or from a farmer was, I think it was $4.50 a pound, and by '97 it was $11.50 a pound. So. Just a huge increase. So,
yeah, and now
that's a field, that's a crop price. I mean, today you hear numbers in 20s and things like that, but that's for sorted different grades and things like that. But that's just buying the whole crop. So, that was a huge jump. So, and the demand was huge back. That was, I mean, in the mid 90s, that was during the boom. So that's when prices kind of went crazy. So, but I mean, the farmers, it helped in some ways and hurt in a lot of others. But it did help in the sense that. A lot of people that were growing, that were thinking of going out, certainly decided to maintain what they were doing. Some people grew, and there's a couple extra generations that got into the farming business and the growing business because of what happened in the early 90s. So, where it was basically just being sold up for, they were for developments. There's nowhere close to what they used to grow. I mean, they grow about a little over 2,000 acres of broadleaf now, and it was in the 20 to thousands back. So it was, but yeah. So I mean, it's pricing is the demand for premium cigars using, and the demand for broadleaf and Maduros in general has just brought a huge. I mean, I don't even want to talk about it now. It's the demand is so high. There's just no tobacco available. I mean, so it's.
I was wondering about that. How much has the I mean, we've heard people call it a broadleaf shortage. I don't know if it's necessarily a shortage, but it's certainly there's more people clamoring for it than there were before. How has that affected Topper?
No, it's definitely affected because no matter what, I mean, you have ebbs and flows of business, and then if you're depending on what your inventory levels are. I mean, if all of a sudden you're a little tight, I could call up one of my, one of the people that I worked with and my dad's worked with for years and years and years. Hey, I need an extra, 10 cases to make an extra few 100,000 cigars just to get us through until we go into the next crop. And they'd always have something in the warehouse. There was always something sitting in the warehouse. And now you walk in the warehouse and it almost brings a tear to your eye. There's nothing there. I mean, it's all they're so far oversold that the orders for tobacco are not met. I mean, there's just you're not getting what you want. Everybody is ordering X amount and they're not getting that. It's just and there's nothing to be found.
Yeah, and I know when I was in Connecticut last year, there was a hailstorm right before I got there that kind of devastated a lot of tobacco fields that were almost ready for harvest. But once that hail hits and you've got leaves with holes in them, they're kind of useless.
And look, it doesn't matter if it's hail, blue mold, this kind of bug or this fungus or whatever. There's always something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's whatever it is every year. There's something. So it's just I don't know how the growers must. I don't think they sleep. I mean, it's just I mean they don't. You can't breathe until it's got to be through the they harvest it, they put it in the sheds. You're still not breathing because there could be damage in the sheds if it's not done properly, or you have the wrong type of weather and it's hard to do it. And then you finally sort it and put it on a container, and then you can breathe, and then you get your money and it's fine. Yeah. It's all set. But other than that, I mean, there's really so many things that can happen. It's crazy. So it's very difficult.
Yeah, and the farmer last year told me that once the hailstorm hit and that field was damaged, it was damaged to the point where it would cost them more to harvest it than it would to just chop it all down and plant it again next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's it's really scary that kind of thing can happen and just kind of wipe out an entire crop. So here I've got I want to talk about the cigars a little bit, like specifically.
Sure.
Talk about the lines. But before I get into that, I want to highlight a question from Harley Holmes. I just finished up the Rosedale, and he wants to know where the name Rosedale comes from, because that's the part of town he lives in.
Really?
His neighborhood is called Rosedale.
Rosedale was a brand that we manufactured for another for another company. I think we started somewhere around the 50s. It was owned by the name of the brand. It was Leschke and Pletcher. It was two people that my dad manufactured the cigars for them. It was a Hartford brand, so I don't know where the name came from. I mean, I know not too far, about 25 minutes from my house, there's a Rosedale Farms, and they have a winery. So I don't know the significance or where that came from, but it was a Hartford brand, Hartford, Connecticut brand. Long story short, we acquired, or we manufactured for them for years. The family at one point passed away, and we bought the rights to the brand and have the trademark now. So
cool. So let's talk about some of the cigars now. So tell us about what Jason and I are smoking. I know it's the Oscuro, and I know it's Broadleaf.
So yeah, that has like the longest name for a cigar. It's the Topper Old Fashioned Perfecto Extra Oscuro.
Okay. So
that's basically it's my favorite machine-made cigar that we have. And it's the blends are similar in that compared to most of the other machine-made cigars. Difference is it's an extra Oscuro wrapper. So they basically, as they ferment the wrappers and process the wrappers and get everything ready for production, they just hand select the darkest wrappers. So it's not a high volume. It's not a high volume.
I'll see if it'll pick that
cigar.
up. If it'll focus. This is the kind of wrapper you'd see on like a Liga Privada or something.
It's a toothy,
it's thick, toothy,
looking,
dark,
it's
oily.
It's sometimes it's pretty. I mean, it can get rustic and pretty rough looking, but that's what it is. That's what broadleaf is. So, and the funny part about that cigar is that we do use there's imported filler in it as well. So it's a broadleaf binder. and then we use there's Dominican and Honduran in the filler. So it's a little bigger ring gauge. It's only a 48, but most of the cigars we make are 44s or 46s. So a little extra filler, just to get a little chance to get just to blend a little more tobacco, and it definitely, to me, it has the most flavor for that of our machine made line. And I think it was 90. I'm trying to remember what year. I think it was 97 or 98. Back the guys from Smoke Magazine, I was friends with one of the editors, and he called up and said, "Hey," he said, "just for the heck of it," he says, I want to," he says, "I'm not going to say anything about it if they don't like it, whenever, we're not going to put it and give you any bad press." But he said, "I just want to put it in the blind taste test with all the other Cubans and Dominicans and Nicaraguans and Hondurans. Then we just want to see what the people think, And I said, "Well, sure." He said, "Give me your best cigar that you think you have, and we'll put it in the blind taste test." So they didn't have to worry about taking bands off, because there's no bands on it anyways. But we sent them a couple boxes of those, and it got the highest review of the issue. I mean, I was back ordered for 18 months after that. I could not. We actually only sold them in the 4-packs that you guys had, and then I came out with them in a box, and it ended up being a pretty big seller. So it's just a great little smoke. I mean, the machine mades, and even some of the handmades that we make, I mean, the less expensive ones, it's an everyday smoke. And it's the way I best describe it is that, it's all good quality tobacco. I mean, our raw materials are really high-end raw materials.
Yeah.
We just manufacture them less expensively. So
yeah, and that comes through with the flavor. I mean, this tastes better than most $3 cigars. I mean, better than I don't know, better than pretty much every $3 cigar, I guess. Because when you pay $3 for a handmade cigar,
just think of the components. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's the same components of what they're putting in. Sorry to interrupt you, but I mean,
it's all right.
it's the same components that you're putting in other high-end cigars. I mean, I know which farmer you're talking about. I mean, we buy tobacco from the same growers that grow for those real high-end cigars that people are paying $15, $18, $20, $25 a piece for. So while it's that we don't age it as long, we don't do everything. We don't do everything they do to the wrappers, but it's still broadleaf. It's still a great wrapper, and the fillers are fine, and it's just that we made, and it sometimes even we kind of get sandwiched in with when they say mass market. I mean, I'm not doing hundreds of millions or billions of units like mass market cigars. It's still these are they're really low volume machine made cigars. They're not making 500,000 a day or $1 million a day, or on some of these crazy fast machines where people are putting out all that stuff. I mean, they do make more than you can make by hand, obviously, but there's still a lot of work involved in working these machines. So, sorry, go ahead. I'll let you make your point. I interrupted.
Oh, it's quite all right. You made it for me. I was just saying that I would put this up against any cigar that's $3, and I bet anybody who smoked them side by side would prefer this. Like, you're not going to get. You can buy a bundle of 25 Churchills at $3 a pop. You're not going to get this kind of flavor out of that, though. No. Like the materials are what they use to bring the cost down, and for you, the materials are what drives your cost up. So you're
Correct.
more expensive.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Or we save the money is on using the machine. So
yeah, exactly. So rather than skimping out on the materials, you're using the machines to drive the cost down. So you're ending up with something that tastes way more expensive than it is compared to other machine mades, because most machine mades, I think, are using subpar quality tobacco. But I mean, it's evident that that's not the case here.
I mean, I would certainly agree. I would probably say even a little higher than $3. I mean, they actually, with S-chip and everything else and all the taxes, I mean, they retail for probably in the between $2 and $2.50 anyway. So
wow.
So yeah. So I mean, most people compare it. I mean, I've had a lot of stories on that cigar and a lot of reviews and things, and I would venture to, I mean, I smoke a lot of Maduros, and obviously my last name's Topper, so I'm a little biased, but I joke with some other manufacturers that I'm good friends with, and I'm like, geez, tastes like an old fashioned to me, and it's a $15 Liga or something. Not Liga, but I mean, it's a $15 whatever. So again, you're not going to get the complexity, but you're going to get some good taste, some good flavor, and that's what it's all about. Not everybody has a $50 budget a day to smoke. So if you want to enjoy a couple cigars, and it's certainly something to put in the mix. And I think the best way to describe it is just an everyday cigar. So whether you're in the garage working on a car, or you're in the backyard doing something and working around, and you're fishing and you hook that big 10-pound bass, you don't want to, you drop the $20 cigar in the water. But this way, at least if this one drops, you can just pull another one out of the 4-pack and you don't feel too bad. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly the right way to put it. We got to take a quick break. Thank one of our sponsors tonight. The first segment of our show is sponsored by store.cigarfederation.com. You can't get toppers there right now, but maybe sometime in the future. We'll see about that. But what you can get is Grimalkins, or didn't they launch something else this week? I feel like they got something else new this week. Oh, they got a couple more Roma samplers. The Illusion Hot 10s came in today. I'm going to order some of those. Some more, a bunch of Singulares. They got a big order from Illusione today. So go there, get your 10% off if you're a Cigar Federation member. And let's get back to it. So Jason, I'll let you ask another question because as usual, I feel like I'm hogging up all the time.
Okay, so in a minute here, we'll get into the details of the machine-made component, but I think a lot of people don't understand that when you talk about machine-made cigars, it's not like you fill a hopper with tobacco and it goes in one end and cigars come out the other end. Yeah. It's a lot more detailed than that. So
that's exactly how it works. You're right. That's just what happens.
I was kind of curious about
10,000 moving parts and 2 employees that are one's laying the binder and one's laying the wrapper. So,
yeah.
But in essence, you described how it is, but obviously it's a lot more intricate than that. So, I mean, I don't have it to show you or explain here, but I mean, basically, I mean, there is a hopper at the end. That's how it starts. And then there's one of the big differences with our cigars is that a lot of machine-made cigars will use a natural leaf wrapper and a homogenized binder. So that it cuts in half the cost of the labor anyways, because you only need one person to operate the machine. With the machines that they use to make our cigars, you have to have 2 operators. The filler will come out, and there's a person that has the binder, and they'll lay the binder on the die, and then it'll form and shape the cigar. And then literally there's a hand that takes it from one side of the machine to the other, and then there's a wrapper layer on the other side. And then they'll finish it, and then it comes off, and they clip the end, and that's it. And it is, in theory, it's pretty simple. But I mean, if you're there watching the machines, I know.
When you see these machines, they're so complicated. There's so many parts going all over the place. It's crazy to watch those things.
No matter how many times I go to the factory, I have to just sit there and watch for a while because I always pick up on something that I never saw before. So it's just, and I'm not very mechanically inclined, but to sit there and look at it and just try and understand how it's all working, it is pretty cool. I mean, and I have the same fascination when I'm watching somebody hand rolling. I mean, you wouldn't think that it would be that exciting to watch the machines work, but maybe because the machines were made in the 40s and 50s, and that's just to realize that they've lasted the test of time, and they're still doing quality cigars out of them. So it's just even to think back of how they put those things together that long ago. So it's really something that until you see it, you really don't. It's hard to grasp what it looks like and how it works. And I think Tripp, I can. I remember you making those points and just saying how cool it was just the way these machines work. So
some of them, it's unbelievable to watch. And I mean, I haven't seen every machine that there is out there, but the machines that I have seen is one of the ones where it's got like a vacuum on one side and they use that for the binder, I think, or the wrapper, and it like die cuts it, and it's crazy to watch. And there's so many moving parts. Like you have to focus on one piece and see, okay, that piece goes over here and grabs this and then puts it there. And then you eventually figure out, like you go up the chain and figure out where each piece is going. It's so fascinating. Vincenzo Scarduzio has thank you for watching, Vincenzo. He has a question about the machines. He wants to know how efficient they are and what percentage of the resulting cigars are not suitable to be sold.
Don't have an exact percentage for them. They are pretty efficient. It usually when there's an issue with the cigar, it's more inclined to be there's an issue with the tobacco. So they have to be careful on that when they're laying the wrapper and everything. If something's off or it gets stuck in the middle somewhere, I mean, you'll have some breakage. But there's not a lot of. I've never sold seconds, so I'm sure out of the factory they might have had some seconds that they sell, but it's not a huge percentage. They're pretty efficient.
Cool. Jason, I'll let you go ahead with another one.
I'll just one caveat is that it's definitely not my expertise. Is the manufacturing. I mean, that's where Craig Smith, who basically I mean, we're not partners, but I mean, I consider him a partner because I've worked with him since I got into the business, and we're our families have worked together forever. And he's the guy. I mean, he just it's insane how much he knows about these machines. I would venture to say there's probably there's a handful of people in the world that know how to operate these type of machines efficiently and know them, and he's definitely in the top 5 as far as knowing everything. If he's not the smartest one on these machines, so there's not a lot of people left that really know how to operate them. So.
Yeah, that's what happens when you buy machines that are 70 years old, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know if there are, is anybody making a more modern version of these machines?
There are some modern versions. They're quite expensive. So, but we still have a lot of spare parts and things like that. So I'm sure at some point in some time we're going to have to do that. But as of now, I mean, we're still using them as And again, it's just for my brand. We used to make Smiths used to make a lot of other brands and had way more production. So I mean, it's kind of the best of what they have left machinery wise is what we're using. So and then everything else, they have tons of parts and keep things going. So
nice. I always like it when you see them kind of like old technology still being used. Every once in a while you see like a documentary of like a candy factory or something that is running the same equipment that they were running back in the 30s or 40s, and it's just fascinating.
I mean, they're all AMF machines. I think of the old bowling machines from back in the day. Same company. That's who made them. So
nice. And then kind of is there any other considerations you have to take on the tobacco side of thing when kind of preparing the tobacco to go into these machines that maybe the handmade market doesn't consider?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. It's the thickness of and the weight of the wrapper. I mean, if the wrapper is really heavy, it's hard to use. So you need to have. There's a real balance in getting the right tobacco. I mean, I know when I go out to Pennsylvania or even in the Dominican when they have different machines out there, and I see people there as well. It's just. I kind of go to the people that I've seen for years and years and years that have been manufacturing. I'm like, how's the tobacco going? How's things? Like, it's been a pain, or, it's been pretty good lately. It's just a matter of, because it's just really hard for them. I mean, the biggest thing, what it all comes down to, no matter if it's handmade, machine made, or whatever you're doing, it's the yield of the tobacco. And if you're having issues and you can only get, 1 or 2 cuts out of a side versus if you can get 3 or sometimes 4, if it's a bigger leaf, I mean, that's a huge difference. So if it's got to be pliable, but not too heavy, but not too thin, because then it breaks. So I mean, there's really a happy medium, and unfortunately, I mean, it's not like you can just order it that way. I mean, I've dealt with the same growers for many years, and they help us, and they know they go through the fields, and when they're they grow their own crops, but I may not buy their crop. I may buy something that they buy from another farmer, so that they kind of know how the crop was and whether or not it's going to be good for the machines versus something that a premium cigar factory would want to use. So.
That makes sense. So let's talk about some of the cigars that you offer, because I'm sure people are wondering what they should get from you besides this old-fashioned extra oscuro. I know I'm missing a couple words there.
Just one, just the Perfecto.
Okay.
Yes. So I mean, the machine made line it's all very similarly blended. So I mean, any one of those you're going to get pretty much the taste of what you guys have tonight. Maybe not as much because some are a little smaller ring gauge. And that's the bulk of our business is the machine-made cigar line. But I do have, we work with, I know you had talked about Phil and Jean-Michel from De Los Reyes, and they basically make a handmade version. It's the same sizes and shapes, and it's similarly blended. And even if it was, I mean, it's very similar blended, but it's just, it smokes different. It's because it's made different. So it's just a different feel. It's a little bit of a different look because they're put in molds versus the actual, the machine made version. But they're a little more expensive because they're handmade, but we're still using the same components. And they're going to smoke a little bit different. They tend to smoke sometimes a little quicker than the machine made ones actually.
Really?
So, but
interesting.
They just have a different feel to them. But yeah, so that's we did that back in I think around 2012. We switched over a lot to some handmade products. So again, mix those. The main difference is it's a bigger filler. It's still short, but it's a longer cut. We use a lot of longer cuts. The cuttings from the handmade cigars from the premium market. So I kind of serve a lot of times factories. I'm kind of how do I say this? Well, I'm kind of a good guy to have around because not that there's a lot when they're making handmade cigars. There's going to be cuttings and there's going to be extra tobacco. So
yeah, they got to sell their picador to someone.
It's not scraps. I mean, never like to say, oh, it's the scraps. Well, I mean, it's no different. It's just a smaller piece of that same long filler that you have in your other cigar. So, I mean, sure, machine-made cigars are going to smoke a little hotter. They may not burn as good. A lot of times, if it's constructed well, you'll still have a nice ash and things like that. You're going to drop an ash more occasionally than you would in a long filler cigar. But, I mean, that's the main difference. So,
I mean, I just ashed this, but look how smooth that burn is. Like it's very surprising for a short filler to me, because I'm not used to seeing that in short filler. Usually, it's getting all wonky. So that's credit to you.
I think it's a credit to the tobacco. I mean, it really is. Again, you said it better than I've ever even said it. I like what I got to remember exactly how you said that. I mean, we really, it's the raw materials. I mean, we have. That brings up our cost as opposed to when you think of a cheap cigar, it's all cheap tobacco. Well, what we're trying to save on is being able to make, $4,000 a day or $4,500 on a machine versus $250 with a hand of rollers. So,
they're solid feeling too. It's relative to the size, like it feels significant.
Yeah, it doesn't feel squishy or soft or light. I mean, I'm really impressed with these cigars as machine mades go. I mean, as cigars go, even I'm impressed with them. So here's a question. So they used to be clear Havanas, like we talked about before. They used to be Cuban filler with broadleaf wrapper. Have you ever gone to one of your factories and said, "Make me one with Cuban filler"? Because Cuban filler's around. They're just not allowed to sell it. So I've seen a lot of factories that have some just for experimentation purposes. Have you ever done that?
I think you got to have more money in the bank than I do to get the guys to free up for that. You want me to tell you? I mean, look, you hear all kinds of stories. So, I mean, I haven't really done that. I mean, I've talked about it, but I've never really seriously engaged in conversation. And obviously now it'll be pretty difficult with everything that's going on in our industry. But it's, I mean, nothing would be cooler than.
Sell them. There's no way you'd be able to sell them at this point.
No, but I could smoke them. That'd be good. I would just bring them in for me. I could bring them in a suitcase. That would be about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If the embargo did suddenly end tomorrow, would you be exploring going back to Cuban filler?
I mean,
assuming
FDA aside,
that it wouldn't be. Yeah, FDA.
Unbelievable. Look,
aside.
I don't want to get on a long tangent, but I think I might have told you this when I met you in the Dominican. If you want to talk about that old Cuban, the box of Cuban toppers that I found, that was from circa 1960, and to smoke that cigar that I found it was roughly from 1960. I could tell by the stamp on the box. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, it defies any logic. I mean, there's no reason why a cigar that is that old should actually still have any flavor or burn nice. I mean, and it's just, I don't have many left. I don't even know what to do with them. I mean, obviously I want to smoke them, but I mean, I've gone through that experience, and it's everybody wants to try them, and I don't have enough to share. So I mean, it's hard to, but just to when I brought those cigars, when I found the box, I didn't really know that they were Cubans because I had them in a warehouse, and like everybody has this story in the cigar industry. I don't know what it is with us, this losing tobacco in boxes, but in any event, I found this box, and sure enough, I looked at the bottom, and it had the code from our factory, which was the handmade factory. And when I opened it up, there was 40 cigars left in the box. It was partially gone. So, and I just remember sitting in my office, and I'm sitting there by myself. I had a picture of my grandfather and my dad, and it just kind of was looking at me. And it was almost as if they were just sitting down there looking at me. And I unwrapped it, and I found there was a couple that had some bug damage because it wasn't in the best storage area. And long story short, I just to assure that they were Cubans, I cut like a third. It was a perfecto size, like you guys are smoking, and I cut about a third of the bottom off because it was just destroyed. And I started to I took the wrapper off, and I was like, okay, and I was kind of sweating and breathing heavy I was so excited to see if this was really what I thought it was. Took the binder off, and I could tell right away it was all long filler. So we never made any cigars long filler that weren't, well, at that time, that weren't Cuban. So
yeah.
And I literally fired it up right there and smoked through it. And it was unbelievable just sitting there smoking. It was like my grandfather and my dad were looking down on me and just watching me smoke that. It was the most emotional cigar I ever had, if there is such a thing. So but it was such a great experience. So And then after that, I put them in the humidor, and after about 6 months, they came back to life pretty good. And it was they put it in Cigar Aficionado in the Connoisseur's Corner, and it got like a 93 or 94 or something. So it was just like unbelievable to smoke a piece of history like that, especially knowing that it was my dad or my grandfather might even have been alive when it was made. So it was kind of it was awesome. So in any event, Broadleaf is just something different. It's like a little. Phil Zangi describes it as a time capsule. And I think there's just not a lot of wrappers that would be able to hold up that long, and it just it was awesome. So, anyways, I got on a tangent. I forgot where you were asking me to begin with.
If the Cuban embargo were to just disappear and the FDA wasn't a problem, and you didn't have to worry about how unavailable Cuban tobacco would be,
absolutely. That would be awesome to be able to do that again. So it would be incredible just to be able to do that. To have the opportunity to. I still have old molds from our factory, so it'd be. The molds that only made cigars that were with Cuban long fillers. So it would be kind of cool just to make them in the old molds. So it would be awesome. So
that'd be really cool.
I guess technically it is pre-predicate date by a very long time.
Exactly.
Well, you talk about that. I remember talking when we were, we can talk a little bit about the FDA at whatever point you want, but the date is so crazy anyways. You make the date 1897 and everything we're making is almost the same thing that we were doing back then. There's really not a lot different that they were doing. When I was younger, I think when I just started, it was like my first or second year in the business in the early 90s. And I went to the Dominican and I'm thinking, boy, this is going to be something different, or I don't know what to expect. And I got there and I'm like, well, it doesn't look any different than Connecticut. Maybe the tractors weren't using as many tractors, but it's the same thing that I used to go with my dad when I was a young kid, and as I got older, I would go to see the growers and the farmers that we deal with. So, it's been done the same way. There's no tricks. Everybody has their little specialties that they do, and they treat it a little bit differently. But there's really no tricks. It's all done the same way. So, we're all dealing with the same raw materials. It's just a matter of blending them.
Absolutely, Jason. Go ahead with another question, so that I don't hog it all.
So for Topper Cigars, what do you sell the most of? What's your highest volume product?
It's the machine made. Actually, we have one of the. If you want an individual, we have a topper and a 5-pack, and that's that you'll see from convenience stores to I sell, and then we also have it. It's in New England, you'll see it in regular tobacco shops as well. So, but that as far as volume, that's the biggest volume that we sell.
Cool. And then is there something that you're trying to kind of like promote or push now that is sort of on the newer side of what you're doing?
The biggest change that we made was in 2016, we introduced our 120th anniversary. It's real limited. I think I sent you guys a couple of the Maduros. Yep. They're numbered boxes. The inside lid has pictures of all 4 generations with our signatures, and I always wanted to have, don't get me wrong, I love the machine-made cigars, but like anybody else, it is an everyday cigar. So if you have a special occasion or you want to, you're hanging out with your buddies and you want to have a little more sophisticated, you have a little more sophisticated cigar or something with a little more complexity. I always wanted to have something with my name on it that was, I love smoking all my competition. I do that all the time. You get cigars all the time, and I'm trying different things, but kind of nice to have our band on something that's a premium. So. That's really what I'm doing, but it's really low numbers. I'm not doing, like I said, they're limited numbered boxes, and it's not something that I'm doing, hundreds of thousands or even, 50,000. They're small numbers, but I kind of like to have that, just to have something a little different and something to, I think, 120 years is something to celebrate for sure. So
yeah,
I thought it was worthy. Thought it was worthy of doing something and not letting it go by.
Especially in the cigar industry, because like I was saying before, a lot of the brands, like most brands, are either an old Cuban brand a lot of them are from the early 1800s, late 1700s even. And then most of the brands that we're familiar with in the States came in after like the 1960s because of the Cuban embargo. There are not many brands these days that are over, 60 years old. I
think I just saw a magazine today, like Macanudo was 50. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Davidoff is turned 50 this year too.
So
And
I mean, look,
50 years
nothing,
on both of them.
yeah, nothing to do with me. I mean, it's a testament to the three generations prior to me, and just I mean, how do you last that long? Well, I mean, you got to make a quality, affordable product, and be able to get through four generations that can actually work together. And believe me, I'm sure, as with any family business, I'm sure there was times where things were, it's just like anything. But it's really a testament to the product and what we were making, and the materials that we use. And it's all about building relationships, and just I think it is different to have your own name on the product. I mean,
it's got to feel a little weird, right?
Yeah, it does sometimes. I mean, but it also, I mean, we go to the trade shows, and I tell, I have like a 2-minute story that encompasses 120 years, and I tell it's like I just hit the replay button, but sometimes I sit back and think, well, it is pretty cool to be able to, I feel honored to be able to do it. And, I think it was my first or second year in the business, and I was at a store, and some guy was talking to me, and he's like, oh, fourth generation. I said, you better not screw it up. And I'm like, oh, thanks. Just what I need, that weight on my shoulders, but it's like anything. It's just, it's kind of a neat aspect to it. And, I don't know. I mean, it's I guess they say it's in your blood, and obviously it truly is in mine. So, I mean, I gotta keep doing it. I don't have a choice at this point. So I got 3 kids going to college this year. So we got to get some guys. Got to get some guys smoking some toppers. So, but no. Anyways, it's truly it's a cool thing to have. So, I mean, there's not a lot. There's a lot of the guys in the industry do use their names. So I mean, they do have that, but there's not a lot that can say they're really fourth generation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of families that have been in the business, in and out of it. Some are growing, some are making this, or all of a sudden you're, whatever, you've been around for 150 years. But there's really not a lot of people that have actually continued doing the same thing for that long of a period of time. So.
Yeah, and especially family operated, because a lot of the older companies are now like conglomerates where they've merged together, they've been acquired and all that stuff. So it's cool that yours is a family run business for 120 years. It's crazy. Bob Langmaid has a good question. He wants to know how tough it is to keep the machines in good working order.
It's insane. It really is. It's again, not my expertise. I don't do it. If it was up to me, we would have been out of business 40 years ago. So, I mean, I have no knowledge of how all that works, and don't pretend to. I mean, I have an idea of what goes on, but that's really Craig Smith, and he's the part of the business that, he's my supplier. So he's the one that's making them and making, and it's just, like I said, it's very difficult. There's not a lot of, I mean, you can teach people how to do it, but it's just, they have to have so many mechanics, and he still gets his hands in there and fixes them and gets them working right, and has to train people because there's always turnover or things like that or whatever. And you have to have someone that knows what they're doing. I mean, it's a constant battle.
Yeah. One of the factories that we visited when we were in the DR, they had an entire room. I mean, I don't like calling it a room because it's really a warehouse, and it was just
more
filled
like
with spare parts.
Yeah.
All it was spare parts from floor to ceiling. And the crazy part is, like, they had these guys going through labeling each part because in this year they changed this cam lever, and then this year they changed this gear. And you end up with all of these pieces that go to different ones that are slightly different from each other. And you have to have people who know what goes into what, and how to fix a specific problem with it.
And even take it a step
crazy.
further. So all of a sudden, say you put a new cam on something, right? Well, all of a sudden, this machine's used to working with that old cam. Now you have a new cam in there, and with the other 10,000 moving parts, all of a sudden, then that's gonna there's another something else is gonna go because of that. Because now there's more stress. Before that, because it was worn, it was taking a lot of the stress. Now all of a sudden, you got a brand new part in there, so the stress is getting diverted someplace else. Or like I said, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not explaining it properly. But it impacts the rest of the machine as well. So
yeah.
It's just a constant battle and struggle to do that and keep it. Look, the key behind machine-made cigars are, I mean, you think that they should be, in essence, be more. There's less. It's not a completely handmade product. Obviously, they're using their hands to lay the binders and the wrappers and work the machines, but there's a lot less room for error other than all these mechanical parts. When it's all working fine, I mean, you should have a more consistent product overall. So, but it is a battle to keep those machines so that they do continue to make the consistent product.
Mm-hmm.
I bet. Before we continue, I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to thank one of our sponsors. Jason's wearing the hat. This segment is brought to you by Drew Estate. I'm trying to think of Jason, what Drew Estate cigar should we highlight today?
Let's talk about the Norteño.
That's a good one. Those little flat box press, spicy San Andreas. They're good. Go get them. All right. Jason, I'll let you kick off this section with a question.
Cool. So has since you've taken over kind of operations of the company, has there been anything that you've had to change? Kind of maybe not necessarily in like the manufacturing side, but like in the sourcing side or distribution wise or things like that, or have you been able to maintain?
I mean, for the most part, I've been able to maintain. I mean, I do have to change kind of some of the ways I've been doing things. Right now, we're one of the last companies that uses the type of machinery that we use. And for whatever reason, in the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of our competitors, there used to be like a handful or half a dozen of companies that made similar products. And I'm the last one left. So we picked up a lot of business because of that. So I kind of have to change the way I actually, I mean, it's not I wouldn't say it's a one-man operation, but it's like it's a one-man operation. I still make sales calls and I'm out on the road and doing things like that. So, but to try and keep up with the demand that we've had over the last couple of years, I really don't have as much time to go out and do that. So I'm in the process of kind of changing how that works. And the way our business was built was basically through a lot of candy and tobacco wholesalers that really just spread the product out to a large variety of customers, whether it's smoke shops or like discount outlets, or even sometimes like you see a lot of old-fashioned convenience stores that'll have a case with 30 or 40 or 50 boxes of cigars in it, those type of places. So and I obviously, even if I had sales reps, I mean, I'd have to have a big sales force to get out there and do that. Where I have a lot of these wholesalers, I mean, they have 20 or 30 guys that are just selling in Connecticut, so, or 10 or 15 guys in each company, then that's what they're out there doing. So that's kind of my sales force in essence, the way that the business was set up. So it's kind of easier for me to run in that sense, but I'm having less and less time because of a lot of the traveling that I've been doing. And right now, sourcing tobacco is not easy. So there's a lot more involved in that, and fighting the FDA and keeping up with all the packaging requirements and all that stuff. So I'm in the process of kind of changing of where I have to spend a lot of my time. So.
Yeah, that's true. When you're doing a high volume product and suddenly you have this warning label requirement where you have to adjust packaging in boxes, that's got to be significant.
I mean, look, it's the FDA is. I mean, they're not going away as much as we would like. They're here. I mean, the warning labels are here. I mean, there's possibilities. We keep hearing things and are hopeful, but I mean. People have to realize that it's part of it. I mean, it's the undertaking to do all that is just it's a task. It's a large task for sure. So just to making sure that you're complying with everything. Fortunately, I'm in with a group of people that some of the manufacturers I work with, and they help me out with all that. So if it was just me alone and I didn't have those associations and again, they're not partners, but my partners in manufacturing. Without them and their resources and being able to know what to do, and if I had to go out and hire the attorneys to do all this stuff, I mean, it would be a strain on business for sure. So, which may be why some of my competitors are gone too. I don't know. I mean, they were a lot of smaller. They were similarly set up. A lot of them were larger, but they still ended up going out. So, and that was part of the discussion, I'm sure, in a lot of those situations where people just decided to retire and some of those brands just didn't even continue. So that was it. They're just out of the market. So
is Topper available outside of the US?
At the moment, not really. No, we haven't. I've worked a bunch of times with different people and never have actually more so back during the boom. We were trying to do some stuff in Canada and different parts like that, but I haven't really worked on that much. Having said that, starting to definitely look at those options now, just because of everything that's going on in the States, and just it's not a bad idea to be able to have some distribution in some other markets. So
widen the footprint a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you had to, I've been trying to ask this question to everybody, and I forget once in a while. If you had to recommend 3 of your cigars to somebody who's not familiar with your brand at all, which 3 would you recommend to kind of, show them what your brand is all about?
Yeah, I would think that. I think the best is the one that you're smoking for the best machine-made cigar. I would try that one. So the Topper Old Fashioned Perfecto, and that has that extra escrow wrapper. That would be. It's definitely a go-to. I mean, for me, it's still a go-to. It's always in the mix. I always have a 4-pack open in the car. And it never goes dry. So that's definitely one. As far as our Dominican line, which is the Topper, that's the handmade toppers that are made in at De Los Reyes and I work with Phil Zangi, who makes them. They work together to make them for me. I would try the Topper Breva. That's probably my favorite of the handmade line that's there. And the other one I would try, I do work with. Originally, we had. I think you have some. You might have had some in some of the cigars that I sent you to try. Was the Topper Dan Lee?
Yes.
Would try one of those as well. Those are a little bigger ring gauge. There is one Bellicoso, but everything's it's a more traditional sizes. There's a Robusto, Toro, and Churchill, and those are all 50. Or the Bellicoso is a 54 ring gauge. So any one of the Topper Dan Lees I would try. Again, that's an extremely affordable cigar as well. A little more expensive than the machine made, obviously, but they're really reasonably priced. And I worked with Christian Aroa helped blend that with me.
Oh,
so
okay.
I worked with Camacho for years, and now I work with Davidoff since they bought Camacho. So it's still made in the Camacho factory, and basically it's Connecticut broadleaf with cuttings from the Camacho Corojo. So it has a little more body to it, and it's a complete different taste than what you get out of the machine mades or the Dominican cigars. So those are the 3 main ones that I would try. Obviously, on top of that, I mean, if you have a chance and you have a retailer near you that has one of our anniversary cigars, those are, that's more of a special occasion type thing for me. I mean, I'm smoking one now, but those are something that if you have an opportunity, certainly I would try them. So
I'm looking forward to trying that one.
Yeah, I think the one I gave you or the one that you have has the broadleaf wrapper. It's actually a Pennsylvania broadleaf. So. Which a lot of people ask, why would I use Pennsylvania broadleaf since we're so known for Connecticut? So the whole idea behind using the Pennsylvania, and I'm not a huge fan of Pennsylvania. I like it, but not as much as Connecticut. That one actually was aged 5 years after they were made, so it really came into its own. I thought it was, but I also thought it was more. I tried to make that as much of a, I don't know, tribute's not the right word, but I tried to make it something true to the company. And since we were established and manufactured in Pennsylvania for all those years, I thought it was interesting just to put the Pennsylvania wrapper on it. That's where we started and that's where our roots were. So, and it's still broadleaf, but it's just Pennsylvania. So a little different.
It's just a little different. For me, Connecticut tends to be sweeter and a little more like full.
It's just got more smoke. It's got more flavor. It's got a little more flavor.
Pennsylvania tends to be kind of more spicy and I guess earthy, I would call it.
I would say it's just not as full as I would agree with.
Yeah, it doesn't have
it's not as full as Connecticut.
It doesn't coat your mouth in smoke like Connecticut broadleaf does.
It does.
It seems like Pennsylvania is more dependent on the rest of the components. I kind of feel like you could throw broadleaf on just about anything. You're like, oh, okay, that's broadleaf. I recognize that.
Yeah, I would agree. But having said that, the wrappers have come a long way. I mean, there was 15, 20 years ago, I couldn't stand the taste of it. And it's really become... we used it for binders on a lot of our cigars, but other than that, I would never even think of using it as a wrapper. There's a lot of premium guys that use it, and mostly I think the reason that premium guys went there was is Connecticut's so hard to get and it's so expensive. And Pennsylvania it's not inexpensive by any means, but it's a little less than Connecticut. So,
and it's a little easier to get your hands on.
But even not now, you can't get that either. So anything that has, you really can't. I mean, it's. the one thing about being in business as long as our family has, it's certainly the relationships that you have over the years have. I mean, if you're a new guy coming in trying to get it, which is impossible anyways with the FDA, but in general, if you're a newer guy without any relationships trying to go out and buy broadleaf from anyone, you're not going to get it. It's just not going to happen. So,
all right, Jason, we got time for one more question before we close out for the evening.
Okay, so excuse me, have you noticed any kind of changing trends in the cigar industry that you notice are affecting you?
I would say that, yeah, absolutely. The biggest, I mean, obviously we had some competitors that vacated the market, but there definitely is a newer interest in the natural leaf machine-made cigars by far. I mean, I think that it's just it's one of affordability, and when you have something that's especially when ours are all tobacco, so it's still an appealing product. At an affordable price, and it's just gotten more widespread use and interest. I think that people, I mean, there's a lot of guys that start smoking and they start right off and they're in $10 and $15 cigars, and it's like, this is great, but all of a sudden they realize that they like it, but whatever. I mean, life gets in the way sometimes. You don't actually have, not everybody has that kind of extra cash in their wallet. So there's been an interest in the natural leaf in general, and I think that's. They're looking for affordable type cigars, and we kind of fill that niche. There's not I mean, our main competitors are like bundle type cigars, things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not knocking bundle cigars at all, because I mean, that's fine. It's a great it's a great value as well. But again, going back to what you said, those bundles usually are bundles for a reason. Their cost is brought down because they're not the higher end. I mean, they're not putting Connecticut Broadleaf on those, and they're not using broadleaf in the filler, and they're not using the quality filler that we're using. They're using there's a reason why it's $30 for 25 cigars. So I mean, they're smokable and it's fine, but you're not going to get the flavor that you guys I mean, or at least I don't think you're going to get the flavor that you get out of that Perfecto that you guys are smoking now, for sure. So
I've never had one of those cheap bundle cigars that tastes like this. I mean, this is, I'm trying to think of what to compare it to, and to me, it reminds me of like a Liga Privada or something like that. Like the
well, what's the wrapper on a Privada?
It's Connecticut Broadleaf.
What's the binder? Off the top of your head?
I don't remember. It might be Brazilian. I'm not sure.
Right, so that's different. What's the filler? The
filler I'm not sure about. I know it's got Dominican and Nicaraguan filler in it.
Bingo, you're a winner. It's the same tobacco. I mean, it's a lot of the same components. Again, by far, it's not by any stretch of the imagination, it's not a Liga Privada, but
exactly.
Having said that, it's similar components. I mean,
it evokes a similar feeling.
We source our tobaccos from some of the same people. Let's just put it that way. In Connecticut. So I mean, it's when you do that, and again, we don't age it as long. Obviously, we don't do what they do, but there's different things that they do, and that's why they're $15, $18, whatever. But I mean, to get a 4-pack of those for $10 in a store, it's not a bad deal. So
exactly,
certainly we'll get some use out of it. So.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you to all of our Armed Forces Radio Network listeners. We appreciate you guys out there doing things we're not built to do, protecting our freedoms back here so we can hang out and smoke cigars. Hopefully you were entertained for this hour, and it got your mind off whatever's going on. You got a little bit of time to relax. Thank you to all of our live viewers and your questions. We appreciate that. We appreciate. I saw there was just like a flood of thumbs up just now, which was awesome. Thanks. And we'll be back next week with a new episode of Sharing Our Pairings, and I think we have a guest for Cigar Chat. I'll have to double check the schedule, and then the week after that, I think I'm going to be out of town, but I'll let you guys know. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you again to Chris Topper. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It was great talking to you.
All right, everybody, have a great night, and we'll see you next time.